Hello, and thank you for joining this webinar about ISO 27001 implementation process. And yeah, just before we start with the webinar, let's actually wait maybe a minute for everyone to join. And yeah, well, while we are waiting for other people to join, can you just let me know where are you joining from? I'm calling in from Zagreb, from Croatia. So if you can just let me know the city and the country where you're joining from, you can actually send it through this Q&A pane in Zoom, or if you joined through LinkedIn or through YouTube, then you can send it through a chat message. All right, while we are waiting for your inputs, just a couple of notes here. So first of all, we are recording this webinar, and you'll be able to watch actually the webinar basically from the same page where you registered for the webinar. So if you registered through on 𝗏𝗲𝗏𝗏 website, you will actually see the recording on the same page. And if you're watching this webinar on YouTube or LinkedIn, then you can actually see the recording on the same page where you see the live webinar now. Okay, I see Bob joining in from Houston. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Also from 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗏𝗏. Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know. Good. Okay. Second thing that I wanted to let you know is that if you want to download this presentation deck, I'll actually let you know at the end of the webinar where you can join the webinar, where you can actually download this. So I'll tell you where to find this download link for downloading the presentation deck. All right, I see some other people from Kansas, also United States. Okay, great. So lots of people around the world. Great, I think we can start the webinar. So welcome to this webinar, ISO 27001, an overview of ISMS implementation process. My name is 𝗪𝗲𝗏𝗁𝗁 and I'm the main ISO 27001 expert at 𝗹𝗲𝗿𝗲. And 𝗹𝗲𝗿𝗲 is a company that makes ISO 27001 and other ISO standards easy to understand and simple to use. And this webinar today will last approximately 50, maybe 60 minutes. And it will really depend on the number of questions you have. And by all means, please do send all the questions that you want me to answer. And you can actually send those questions as I go through my presentation, and you do not have to wait for this Q&A session at the end. So again, if you have any question, let me know right away. Okay, let me go to the next slide. So basically, very often I see companies that they start with this ISO 27001 thinking they simply have to draw a couple of write a couple of documents and this would be basically it. And this way really they stuck in a project, and ultimately it costs them much more than if they have actually planned carefully what this project really takes to succeed. So I would say that ISO 27001 is much more than writing documents. I would say writing documents is maybe, I don't know, 20% of the effort, whereas 80% of the effort is really changing the way you actually do security in the company. And yeah, so basically the what I'll present in the webinar is really how to prepare and what kind of steps are needed for the implementation and how to prepare for the certification if your company goes for the certification. And this webinar today is basically intended for anyone who is implementing this standard for the first time. I'll go through some very basics. So if you are, I don't know, someone who is, let's say, a CTO or maybe a project manager doing this for the first time, or maybe if you're a consultant and doing this for the first time, then this webinar is for you. If you're on the other hand, let's say an experienced consultant, then this is probably going to be too basic for you, and there are some other webinars which go into much more detail when it comes to ISO 27001. Okay. So one of my main points today is that this ISO 27001 compliance, it doesn't really have to be, simply a bureaucratic job, like, writing documents. It can actually be, if you do it properly, then it can create much more benefits for your company, and not only increased security, but also actually additional revenue. And this is also what I'll mention in today's webinar. Okay, let's see the agenda for today. And by the way, if you want me to focus on any of these topics, then let me know through the chat window, and then I'll try to spend a little bit more time on any particular topic that you see in the agenda today. Good. So first I'll briefly go through this ISO 27000 family of standards, because there are many of these standards, and I just want to clarify which are important. Then I'll go through these 16 steps that are needed for a company to go through before actually they go for a certification. Then these questions, like how long does it take, how much does it cost, what is the strategy, how to approach the implementation. You'll see the three options there. And also how do you actually find resources for the implementation. Okay, good. So let's start with this first topic, and this is ISO 27000 family of standards. And basically, ISO 27001, you can consider it as a kind of a framework for managing security, or for managing cybersecurity, or cybersecurity governance. So whatever expression is I would say, appropriate for you. So it gives you a framework. It doesn't really go into too much detail. And when thinking, about how the standard is structured, basically, you could argue that there are three main, I would say, elements of the standard. One is that you actually assess and treat the risks, then that you implement the controls, and then that you actually measure how these controls are performing. And when thinking about it, you can actually see that here you have this risks as the first item. Why is it important? Because before starting to implement any control, you should actually consider if there are any risks. Because if there are no risks related, let's say, to a particular control, then why would you actually implement this control? The point being, you should not waste the energy or time or money towards some, let's say, security things that are not really needed. Okay. And this is why you first have to do this risk assessment, and you have to figure out, what really risks you want to decrease. This is why the risk assessment is here the first. And then you go for the implementation of various controls. As you will see throughout this webinar, there are 93 controls in total. Then you actually go for this third part, the measurement, where you actually measure if these controls are achieving whatever, let's say, goals, whatever objectives you have set previously. So these three, I would say, are kind of the most important elements of ISO 27001. Of course, there are many other things in the standard, but I just wanted to point out these three that are really the most important. Now, for these three these three elements, there are additional standards. For risks, there is this ISO 27005. It explains in more detail, how you perform risk assessment and treatment. Then there is this ISO 27001 which is about, this is the implementation guidance for controls. And then there is 27004, which helps you, define how you measure things. Now, if you ask me whether you should read all of these standards, I would say this depends really if you want to do ISO 27001 for a living. If you want this to be your career, if you want to be a consultant, if you want to be a security manager, then I would say yes, you should read all the four standards. So 27001 and 5 and 2 and 4. But if you are doing this only for your company, and if you do not really intend to go in this, let's say, career of cybersecurity governance or something like that, then you probably don't need to read these other standards. And for this implementation for your company only, ISO 27001 is going to be purely enough. And just to emphasize, these other standards are not mandatory. Okay, they're let's say they're only guidances, which means that you can actually use them if you want to, but you do not have to comply with what is written in 27005 or 2 or 4. Okay, let's now go to these steps in the implementation. So as you will see, there are 16 steps, and I will explain each step and then which documents are needed for those steps. And by the way, there is an article on 𝗏𝗲𝗶𝘀 website which also explains these steps in more detail. So if you want to kind of learn or read through this in an article, we'll share this a link to an article now. It's called ISO 27000 Implementation Guide, Checklist of Steps, Timing and Costs. So you will see this in your comment now in the chat window. And just one note here: if you want to open this link, if you joined through Zoom or through YouTube, you can simply click this link and it will open right away in your browser. However, if you joined through LinkedIn, then because of some limitations in LinkedIn, you can't directly click this link. You actually have to copy the URL and paste it into your browser, and then you'll be able to open the link. All right, so the first step is basically that you obtain management support. This is something that is very important because, without the support of senior management, you're not going to get enough people, enough money. So it's very, very important that you actually get their direct support, that they understand why this is needed. In one of the slides later on, I'll explain a couple of techniques on how you can convince them. Anyway, they have to provide, let's say, some kind of a budget, some kind of, document or some other, let's say, way that that you actually have enough money and people available. Okay, the second step is to establish the project and basically that you define, who is the project manager, who is the project sponsor. This sponsor is typically someone from the senior management team. You could also have the project team, especially if you are a large or mid-sized company. You should write some kind of a project plan so that you know exactly who does what and who is responsible for what. So all of these things are very important if you want your project to succeed. And then the next step is that you define or list interested parties and their requirements. And basically this one is important because you want to actually list or document all actually requirements from these third parties, because these are one of the main inputs into what you actually do later on in your ISMS. Because for example, if you have a client which requires you to use a specific type of VPN, then you actually have to collect this input, and then later on, once you write policies or procedures related to these security things, you actually have to include this specific requirement. So this is why that you actually list all of these requirements and then write them down in this list of security requirements. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Then you have to define the scope and management intention. You have to write this ISMS scope document and top-level information security policy, and you also have to define the objectives. Now, the scope, typically, if you are a very small company, like up to 50 employees or so, typically you will include your whole company in the scope. If you are a larger company, I don't know, a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand employees, then you will select only one part of your company, typically one department, and then define that is a scope and that this is something that you will focus on. There is also this top-level policy, information security policy, which basically defines management intention and how the senior management controls cybersecurity. And you should also define what you want to achieve, so set these top-level ISMS objectives. And we'll share now a link with you and this is about this article about how to set the ISO 27001 scope. So if you want to learn more, you can actually take a look at this article. And then the next step is that you define this risk assessment methodology. This is a mandatory document where you actually describe how you're going to perform this risk assessment, because this risk assessment is a complex thing, and if you don't have clear rules on how this needs to be done, then you're going to end up with a problem. You basically define there who is doing what are the, let's say, criteria of assessing the, let's say, impact and likelihood, how you list the assets, all of these things. And to learn more, I will share also a link to an article about this. This is basically a guide for doing the risk assessment and treatment. And And then you actually have to start doing the risk assessment and treatment. And so basically this is where you list all of the assets and then threats and vulnerabilities. Then this is where you actually assess the impact and likelihood. And then you ultimately produce this risk assessment report. Of course, if you're using some kind of a tool, then you can actually have this risk register. I mean, this kind of a tool is not mandatory, but it's usually useful actually because it speeds up the whole implementation. And we'll also share now a link with you to a YouTube video. And basically in this YouTube video, I actually recorded, you know, how you actually do this risk assessment and treatment, what are the steps, and you know, how to speed the things up. So you can take a look at this YouTube video. Okay, and then the next step is basically that you define which controls you need to implement, and this is this needs to be documented in a document called Statement of Applicability. Basically, it's a list of all of these 93 controls from Annex A from ISO 27001, and there you define which control is applicable, which one is not. You define the reason why a particular control is applicable and why it is not, and you also define what is the status. Did you implement it or not? And also how did you implement it? And here you will very often refer to a particular document that describes the details, right? So for example, for a control related to access control, then you will say, okay, here's the access control policy which through which we implemented that particular control. Okay, we'll share now with you a link to this article, Statement of Applicability, what it is and why does it matter. And also we'll share a link to a YouTube video which is called Automating ISO 27001 Statement of Applicability with Conformio. I'll show you later on this Conformio software, but I mean, if you want to see a little bit how to use tools actually to automate things for 27001, then you can take a look at this video. Okay, and then the next step is that you define who will implement particular controls, what are the deadlines, you know, what are the resources needed, these kind of things, and this is documented through a risk treatment plan. So risk treatment plan basically goes after Statement of Applicability, in other words, after you define which controls you want to implement. And you can consider this risk treatment plan as a kind of an implementation plan. All right, the next step is that you define how you're going to measure things. And if you remember, this is one of the three key elements that I've shown in the first slide. And here you basically have to define, you know, how are you going to measure things. And this depends directly on setting the objectives. Because depending on what objectives you were setting, then you will also apply measurement methods. So for example, let's say that your objective was to decrease the number of incidents by, let's say, 20% during the next 1 year. Okay, in this case, the measurement method will simply be, you know, counting the number of incidents and then comparing this number to a previous year. Okay, as simple as that. Depending again, this depends directly on what kind of objective you're setting. And yeah, to learn more, you can read this article called How to Perform Monitoring and Measurement in 27001. You'll see more details there. All right, the next step is basically to implement all of these controls. Now, of course, this will be I would say, longest and the biggest step in the implementation. It will last. It will probably take at least half of your time, of your implementation time. And here you actually have to start writing various documents, various policies and procedures, and you have to perform various tasks. Now, I'll just show you one, let's say, kind of material on Ādvizora website that will help you here. So I'll share the screen now. And you can actually see this resource is called the Big Guide to ISO 27000 clauses. How is this standard structured? All right. So basically, this here actually shows you all the clauses from the standards, from, you know, context of organization. You know, for example, this one is 4.3, determining the scope. But I'll skip all of this now, and I'll go for this Annex A. So as I mentioned, there are 93 controls. As you can see, they start with A.5. Control 5.1 and so on. And it goes on and on and on. As you can see, 93 of them. And here, basically, for each of them, you actually have an explanation of what it is and how to perform it. So, for example, access control. I'll open it in another tab. So when you open this particular control, you will see, first of all, there is an explanation of what this control actually does. I'm not sure why this is not opening now. Yeah, let me try again. Okay, we'll wait a second for this to load. In any case, basically what you'll see for each control, you will see an explanation of what each control requires. Then you will see an explanation of basically what each of these, which kind of documents you have to write for each control. And then you will see implementation steps. And finally, you will see what kind of evidence you have to actually provide for each of these controls. So again, I'm not sure why this is not opening, but in any case, we will share now this a link to this article, and then you will be able to open it and actually click any of these links, and you will see these details once you open it. All right. Yeah, I think it works now. Let me just see. Yeah, here you go. So the control, okay, the explanation, what kind of documents you need, how we implement it, and what kind of evidence is needed. Okay, going back to the presentation. Also, you will need to write several documents, and what we will share now with you is a list of mandatory documents according to ISO 27001. So when you click this link that we'll share, you will see a list of all the documents that are needed, and also a list of some documents that are not needed but are, let's say, recommended. Okay, now I would say the next step, even though it's not really a next step, it's kind of something that is happening in parallel to implementation of controls. So in parallel, I think you should train your employees and raise awareness. Because when you think about it, the biggest resistance when you actually start to implement all of these new things is that either people do not understand why things need to change, why do you need this new access control, right? I mean, why do you need this access control policy, or why do you have to do the backup in a different way from before? Okay, so you have to explain them to why things are needed, and basically this is raising awareness. And also in some cases you will actually have to train them for their new jobs, because if you really change these how security is done in a very different way, then you will have to explain them, and teach them really how to perform these new security activities. So this training and awareness is very important for the success of your project, and this is why I would always recommend you actually to do this training and awareness in parallel to the implementation of security controls. Okay, we'll share now with you two more links. One is about how to perform training and awareness for ISO 27001, and the second one is for a YouTube video. It's called How to Implement ISO 27000 Training and Awareness in SaaS or a tech company. So I know that usually many companies, many of our clients are actually these technology companies, and this is basically a video which focuses specifically on how to use one training platform actually to do the training and awareness, and I'll also show you this training platform in a couple of minutes. Okay, and then the next step is that you actually start operating the ISMS. By the way, I didn't explain what ISMS stands for. ISMS stands for Information Security Management System. Basically, Information Security Management System is, your security program or your governance program, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, operating the ISMS means that you actually start doing or operating or doing security steps or security activities on a regular basis. So for example, let's say that you have a backup policy which specifies that you do have to do the backup probably every day, right? So I mean, starting this backup process every day is basically operating the ISMS, right? And of course, there are many other security activities that you will be doing. So all of these operational things are basically means that you are start operating the ISMS. And of course, you will create various records because of it. Most of them will be automatic. So when you, I don't know, do the backup, there will be some kind of a backup log, which will be automatically created by the backup system. Some records you will create manually. For example, if you have a certain manager who approves the access to employees according to your access control policy, then this approval could be done through, I don't know, email, or through, I don't know, Slack if you're using this kind of a messaging system or something like that. So, or maybe through some kind of a ticketing system. Okay, so all of these are basically records which are then not automatically but manually created because of this security activity of approving access to certain people. Okay, good. The next step is then to monitor the ISMS, basically monitor how the systems are performing, and this is something also that you do regularly, and you have some records of actually all the activities that are monitored. And then one of the important steps is actually to perform this internal audit. This is a mandatory also element according to ISO 27001, and the idea is really that someone that you actually on your own find out what are the gaps towards whatever security requirements you have. You can do this internal audit with your own, that you pick one employee from your own company to do it, or you can hire someone from the outside, someone external. This is up to you. This is still considered an internal audit. Now, why is internal audit important? Because actually this is your final check, not the final one, but the most important check actually before you go for the certification. As you will see, there are a couple of more steps that you have to do until you go for a certification, but internal audit is the most important check, because this is actually where your internal auditor has to go actually through all of your policies and procedures, through all the standard, I mean ISO 27001 standard, and make sure that really your company really complies with whatever you have written. Again, this is very important, and this is something that you have to do. As a consequence of this internal audit, you have to create this internal audit report. So basically, report all the findings and raise all the corrective actions. And basically, corrective actions are based on non-conformities, because typically internal audit will always find lots of non-conformities. So you raise these corrective actions to actually close all of these non-conformities. And then, and by the way, we'll share these two links related to internal audit. One is this internal audit, the complete guide. So this is an article which explains how internal audit needs to be performed. And you also, we also shared with you now this link to a YouTube video where I explain actually also how the internal audit is performed. So depending on whether you like to read or like to watch videos, you can actually pick between these two. Okay, and then the next step is to perform this management review. So management review is basically a point in time where the senior management needs to get directly involved with your ISMS. And this is basically where they take into account, so as an input, various information about your ISMS. So what non-conformities were found, what is the internal audit report, what kind of measurements were found, what kind of additional needs are there for the ISMS. So let's say what kind of additional documentation, what kind of additional resources or a budget is needed, these kind of things. And then the senior management needs to make some crucial decisions, right? If they want to set some new objectives, if they want to, let's say, invest some additional money into ISMS, and so on and so forth. So basically this is also a mandatory step, and again this is where really the senior management needs to take control and basically make some crucial decisions around ISMS. And yeah, as the product or output, you could say this is where you need to create these minutes of the meeting of management review. Okay, we'll also share now with you this link to an article which is called Why is Management Review Important for ISO 27001? And then basically this last step, 16th step, is this making these improvements. As I mentioned, the internal auditor will find lots of non-conformities where you will have to make improvements. Management will, introduce many initiatives where you actually have to improve your ISMS, but also anyone else in the company can also suggest any kind of improvements. And basically, this is where you actually have to improve your ISMS. And by the way, these last couple of steps, so these improvements, but also management review, internal audit, these things have to be done on a repetitive basis. Management review, internal audit at least once a year. And actually, I would recommend that you do management review, let's say at least once a quarter, maybe maybe also once a month, depending really on how much you want to kind of involve your senior management with cybersecurity. Improvements are done continuously. This is not that you do actually only once a month or something. You basically do this whenever there is an opportunity for improvement. Measurement and monitoring, you also do this continuously. So there are lots of things that are actually done on a continuous basis, not only one time. Okay, now let me show you a couple of tools where you can actually, which will make it easier for you to do all of these steps. So first I'll show you this software called 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. So basically this is a software, this is a kind of a small GRC, which GRC stands for Governance, Risk and Compliance. So a small GRC software is especially made for smaller companies for 27001. And basically what it does, it actually shows you exactly what steps you need to take. You'll see there 38 steps, because all of these steps that I mentioned, these 16 are basically broken down into even more smaller steps that, so that you can actually go through this process more easily. And yeah, as you can see, it shows you, this is basically the first phase. And in the first phase, you have this introduction, procedure for document record control, project plan, identification of requirements, register of requirements, and so on. Second phase, this is risk management. Then you have this methodology, risk register, statement of applicability, and then you have security documentation, where you have several documents here. You see lots of documents there. And then a preparation for the external audit, meaning for the certification audit. Here you can actually see several steps towards the end. As you can see, the last one is this management review. And then after you get certified, you can actually move to this maintenance module where you actually maintain your certification. Anyway, each of these steps typically has either some kind of a register, like register, a risk register or register of requirements, or you actually create a particular document. So, for example, here I'm showing you the template where you create ISMS scope document. So here, this document is already written, but I'll just give you a brief overview of how this document looks like. So basically, this document is you have something like 80% of it's already finished, and then you actually fill some specific things for your company. You specify which kind of people you have, what kind of processes, what kind of technology. You actually insert those things into the template, and this is how you personalize the documentation for your particular company. And then as you go towards the end of your project, you have this audit and evidence module where you actually track all the documents that you created and what is their, I'll just have to reload this, and basically what is their status. Yeah, it seems that I have some problem with the internet. It's not loading very well. So I hope that you can hear me well, but in any case, let me just see. Yeah, okay. Okay, it doesn't, let me just wait for this to reload. In any case, you should see a status for each of these documents. So I'll just wait for this page to reload. And also what you can see here, because it's not loading now correctly. So you will also see this clauses and evidence here, something that is, that you will see actually a breakdown per each clause and per each control. how far did you go and what gaps you still have, so what you actually have to fix before you go for the certification. So let me come back here just once this reloads. So something again is not very good with my internet, so it loads very slowly. Okay, anyway, yeah, something is not right. Okay, so besides Conformio, there is also this another product that we have. This is a company training academy. This is basically a training platform which actually helps you train your employees. And we actually have several videos here. So let me see. Yeah, we can actually see this here. So there are, videos for DORA, for GDPR, general cybersecurity awareness, ISO 27001, and so on. So basically, here you can actually select particular videos from this platform, and then you can deliver these videos directly to your employees, and you can actually track exactly who is watching these videos. So this is basically a way for you to organize quickly the training and awareness program for your employees. Okay, let me try to reload this page again. Yeah, still some problems here. Okay, anyway, yeah, let me go back to my presentation. Good. Yeah, let me see if there are any questions coming in. Okay. Good. So a couple of questions here. So from question from Samuel, what is the major factor that determines the choice of a risk treatment option? Is this results of a BAA or the risk analysis result? Basically, first of all, BIA, business impact analysis, is not mandatory according to ISO 27001. This is a concept from ISO 22301. This is a business continuity standard, so you do not have to do it for ISO 27001. But basically, the main, I would say, criteria for a risk treatment option is really the type of the risk you have. For example, if you have, I don't know, let's say, a high risk of loss of data, then you will probably apply a risk treatment option that you will implement some kind of a backup, right? So basically, you try to simplify things in such a way. Okay, a question from Jay. I would like to know how to assess a residual risk after the control is applied. Basically, by the way, you will actually find in this risk guide that we already shared with you, you'll find the answer to this question. But the point is that actually you assess the residual risk in a way that first of all you assess the initial risks that you have, so the impact and likelihood. Then you define which controls you want to apply, and then taking into account these controls that you are going to apply, then you actually assess again the impact and likelihood and measure how much this risk decrease. And basically the remaining risk after this decrease because of these controls is what you have as the residual risk. So again, you apply the same impact and the same scales for impact and likelihood, only taking into account the effect of this control or controls that you plan to implement. Rob is asking, are there certifications associated with ISO 27001 and 2? No. So a company can certify only against ISO 27001. Why? Because 27001 describes requirements, whereas 27002 describes some guidelines which are not mandatory. So 27001 is mandatory, 27002 is not. Now, if you ask whether there are some courses regarding 27002, courses and certifications for individuals, there might be, probably, but I would say majority of certifications and courses are related to ISO 27001. And I'll ask my colleague now to share this link for ISO 27001 courses on Advisor. You will see that there are several courses, including internal auditor course, lead auditor, lead implementer course, and the good thing is that all of these courses are free, so you can actually sign up and go through all the videos for free. So you'll see now this link in the chat window. Okay, Jay is asking, how do we know at the very beginning how much money we might need? Okay, I'll actually go through this issue of budgeting in a couple of slides. Rowan is asking, is there a limit to the company size for ISO 27000 certification? Does the company need to be a certain size? No, actually, in 𝗏𝗲𝗴𝗏 we have, I think the smallest company that went for certification using our tools is 2 employees, right? Only 2. So it's very small. And of course, there are also large companies of tens of thousands of companies, tens of thousands of employees. Okay, Natalia is asking, how do we integrate ISMS into the existing 𝗂𝗲𝗴𝗏? Basically, you have to take a look at what kind of overlaps you have, and this is typically with internal audits, management review, corrective actions, what else? How you actually handle documents. So all of these areas, the requirements for all of these areas are almost the same in 27001 and 9001. So basically, this is where you integrate the management systems. What is different are these, let's say, risk assessment policies and procedures. So for risk assessment and policies and procedures, you actually have to create separate documents because these are not covered by 9001. And I'll ask my colleague to find an article which explains how to integrate 27001 and 9001. Okay, Dua is asking, how frequently is the risk assessment reviewed or updated? At least once a year. So you have to do it at least once a year. Our recommendation is to do it, let's say, twice a year. Clarty is asking, when you determine likelihood and impact, do you need to take into account the controls which are already implemented? Yes, absolutely. The more controls that are already implemented, actually the lower the likelihood will be. Okay, so this is, yeah, definitely very important. Natalia is asking, when the risk management refers to assets, does it mean the different information systems used or equipment as well? Also, what types of controls are referred to IS service providers compared to regular material suppliers? Okay, first I'll answer this first question. So, first of all, ISO 27001 does not require you to list all the assets to perform the risk assessment. There is no such requirement. There was such requirement in the very old 2005 revision of the standard. It was like 20 years ago, so it doesn't exist anymore. In other words, the standard allows you to list the risks without listing the assets. Okay. Now, this asset-based risk assessment is still, I would say, a mainstream methodology for doing the risk assessment. So this is something that we recommend you to do if you want to go this way. And basically, when you're listing the assets, you should use information systems, but also, let's say, physical assets like servers, okay, or maybe air conditioning units, because they also influence your security. Also cabling, right, which is also an important element of your security, because of course these cables could be cut or they could be, I don't know, somehow interfered with. So you do have to take into account not only, let's say, IT systems, but also different type of hardware into account. By the way, you should also take into account people, because these are also, let's say, a different type of assets which influence your risks. Okay, Bob is asking, information data should also be considered in that asset. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, thank you for this reminder. Okay, good. Yeah, let me see if this managed to, yeah, okay, I finally see this here. Yeah, but it didn't load again. Yeah, I'm sorry for these problems. Okay, here I see now. Okay, anyway, so you can see these clauses and evidence in 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and basically for each of these you can actually see what exactly is ready for an audit and what is not. So for example, for 8.6, these controls from Annex 8.6, you can see that some are ready, some are not ready. So basically, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 actually tracks what you're doing according to each of these documents and according to each of these clauses, and then tells you exactly where you're good and where you're not good. So for example, I don't know, yeah, confidentiality and no disclosure agreements. It basically tells you that you are not ready for the audit. This is what this is required. This is some task that is still opened and it's late, and this is why basically you're not finished and you're still not ready for this control for the audit. But for example, this step is actually completed. So you completed the step, but you didn't complete the task, and basically this is why it tells you that you still have to do this to be ready for an audit. Okay, so I just wanted to show you how this particular screen works. I didn't mention this in documents. Yeah, I'm not sure why this doesn't want to show as properly. Okay, anyway, let's go back to my presentation. Good, so let's go for the next slide. And this is about how long does it take. So if you are having a small company, let's say up to 20 employees, then it's typically up to 3 months, right? It doesn't really take too long, especially if you're using some kind of a tool like 𝗶𝗲𝗶𝘀, it's going to be rather quick. If you are 20 to 50 employees, then 3 to 5 months. If you are 50 to 200 employees, roughly half a year. And by the way, when I mention number of employees, I mean number of employees within the scope, right? You might be a company of a couple of thousand employees, but if you have, let's say, 100 employees in the scope, then this would be 5 to 8 months. And finally, more than 200 employees in the scope, this is roughly 8 to 20 months. Okay, good. Now, the next next question is around the cost. Now, unfortunately, you know, this is not a product that you go into a supermarket and, you know, take off the shelf and pay for it. It's not like it has a unique price. There are at least 4 elements to actually how much does it cost to you know, implement and certify against the standard. So first of all, there is a cost of acquiring knowledge. So if you actually, I don't know, send your employees for training, if you are reading some books, whatever, you know, this is one part of your cost. Then you might actually have some new technology. Okay, you might be using, I don't know, 𝗶𝗲𝗶𝘀 or this training platform, or you might be, I don't know, introducing a new backup system, whatever. You know, you might have some cost of technology here. Then you might have, if your company goes for a certification, then you will actually have this cost of certification. And finally, you'll have employees which will have to spend some of their time for this kind of a project, and also this is a cost. Now, for most of these things, you will have to calculate yourself, you know, what are the costs, but for a certification body, we actually have a calculator on our website which can help you. We'll share the link now with you, and basically, you know, you simply have to insert your company size, your company I think industry, what is the location in which country, and then it will suggest a price for the certification. Okay, good. And yeah, what are the, let's say, what is kind of the strategy for the implementation? What kind of approach you should take? The first approach is that you actually go with your employees only. So this means that basically you already have someone within the company who has done this for a couple of times, who knows actually how to do it. And in this case, you don't really need external help. The second approach is where you actually hire a consultant, and then this consultant you know, takes you through all the steps in the implementation. He or she does all the analysis, risk assessment, these kind of things. He or she writes all the documents. He or she does the training, these kind of things. And this is usually the quickest way to implement the standard, but also the most expensive. And then there is this third option, and it is basically in between the first and the second option. And this is basically where your employees are implementing the standard, but they get the knowledge and the know-how from outside. Okay. And basically, we as an advisor are you know, focused on this third option. We basically develop these tools where where we teach and provide you with all the templates, all the software that you need actually for implementing this this standard. Now, of course, the question is, you know, which option you should apply. This really depends on your situation. Again, if you have an employee who is knowledgeable, you should go for the first option. If you're really short with time and you don't really have any internal resources, you should go for the second option. These are the consultants. Or if your budget is not too high and you still want to, let's say, acquire this know-how on how to manage the standard, then you might actually go for this third option here. Okay, good. Now let me just go through a couple. I mean, this thing of how to actually find the resources, really how to you know, find enough money and people to run this kind of a project, first you actually have to, get this senior management commitment. And I would say that when you speak to your senior management, you should actually put this as a business proposition. So you should not speak about, we want to reduce incidents, or we want to, I don't know, purchase new software, or security software or something like this. No, you actually have to tell them, look, if we implement 27001, if you get certified, we will get new clients, okay? Or this will enable us to penetrate some new markets, and so on. And in most cases, it does make sense, because when you think about it, most companies do go for ISO 27001 certification because this is what their clients require them, right? For example, you might have a software development company, and it wants to actually penetrate banking market with its software. And you can't really penetrate and go and start selling this software to banks unless you are certified, right? So basically this certification enables you to penetrate new market and actually increase revenue, okay? Or another option or another scenario might be that actually your existing clients are asking you to be certified, otherwise they might cancel the contract, right? In this case also you're safeguarding your revenue, and this is also a very good argument to your senior management. So these kind of arguments I think you should use when you speak to your senior management. And again, if you can't make them interested, it's better not to go for this kind of a project. This is very, very important. Okay, another thing that is important is to have a project manager. So sometimes I see companies making a mistake in actually giving this task to, let's say, someone who is completely new. Okay, it's only writing documents, right? It's not so important, so we'll give it to a trainee, which is a huge mistake. Someone who has maybe 1 year of experience and right out of the college, this kind of person does not have enough knowledge, does not have enough authority within the company to introduce all of these changes. So no, it's a very bad, I would say, approach. The best thing would actually be that if you do have a security officer, that this person is then doing the project management activity. In larger companies, you would have a professional project manager who would lead the project. In small companies that do not have a security officer, you will probably have a chief technology officer who will take over this job. So you always have to find someone who has experience and authority actually to introduce many of these changes. If you are a mid-sized or a large company, you would typically have this project team, and in this project team you should typically have heads of the departments and other people from the middle management, because it's very important that you have someone who can actually follow you throughout the project and actually work on you with on the documentation, these kind of things. And what you have to remember is that ISO 27001 is very often not about purchasing too many new technologies. It's more about using your existing technologies in a more secure way. So don't think that, thinking back about costs, the biggest cost is not going to be, purchasing these new technologies. No, it's going to be, your biggest cost is probably be around the time of your employees and the certification body. Most of the actually effort will go that you change how you actually use your technology, and that you have to start using it in a more secure way. This is basically what is the biggest challenge, and typically the biggest, I would say, effort needed. Okay, good. So let's go through a conclusion here, and then we'll go for the remaining questions. This, I would say, experience with ISO 27001 implementation can be much more positive than you would typically expect, but only if you really plan the whole thing. And then you will actually I would say, you will achieve all of these benefits. And of course, for that purpose, you can use 𝗹𝗲𝗿𝗲 as a 𝗏𝗏𝗏 software for the implementation, and also this company training academy for training your employees. And I'll also share with you now a meeting link with our 𝗂𝗲𝗶𝘀 expert, and he will actually show you how this software works. Basically, you know, if you want a free demo, if you want a demo, he will show you how this works. But also, if you use already these links for Company Training Academy and for 𝗂𝗲𝗶𝘀, you will actually be able to open a free trial account, 14 days free trial, where you can actually test how everything works. And basically this is it. So let me now go for this Q&A session. Okay, so feel free to send all of your questions through the chat, and I'll try to answer them. So we have, let's say, 5 minutes more. But before actually I start answering questions, just a couple of notes. So first of all, feel free to reach out to me directly through email, and you will see my email address now on the screen. Second, you can follow me on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, I publish regularly some new things about cybersecurity governance, AI governance, about new standards, these kind of things. So if you want to keep up to date, then you can follow me on LinkedIn. On YouTube, I publish lots of videos. There are many videos you'll see also around 𝗂𝗏𝗀𝗁. And on YouTube, I also have this Secure and Simple podcast. And this podcast is intended primarily for consultants and security managers. So if you are doing this for a living, take a look at this podcast. And there I interview successful consultants, successful security managers, and they basically explain, you know, how to become successful. Okay, and just to know that my next webinar will be about AI risk assessment. So it will be the basics of ISO 42001 risk assessment and treatment. And there I will explain how to manage risks related to AI systems. So it's a completely new topic, a very interesting one. And you can actually see the link now to sign up for upcoming webinars. Okay, good. Now let me go through the questions that I received before the webinar, and then I'll move on to your questions during the webinar. So Ivan was asking, what is the practical solution to assign the main responsibility of maintaining the ISMS if there is no information security officer in the company? Basically, yeah, again, if you're a smaller company, you will typically will not have a full-time security officer, which is normal. But then you have to find a person within the company who will actually act as a security officer, at least half-time. Again, this could be a chief technology officer, this could be maybe a head of IT department, or someone, let's say, on this end, and then this person will take, I don't know, 10, 20, 30% of his or her time to perform the security role. Okay, another question from Margaret. Are any of the updated ISO 27001 in conflict with the current EU standards? Not that I'm aware of. Basically what is very, I would say, actual lately are these new regulations in Europe. So this is NIS2. NIS2 is a directive, and each country is publishing their own laws and regulations based on this NIS2 directive. There is also this DORA regulation for financial organizations. And all of these are, I would say, aligned with ISO 27001, but they are much more detailed than 27001. So basically, you could use 27001 as some kind of a baseline or let's say governance framework, and then on top of this governance framework based on 27001, you actually have to add these things from DORA and NIS2. John was asking, what is something that you should do to ensure coverage of areas of the standard that do not have the clearest definition? Okay, so sometimes the standard is not very clear, you know, what you have to do. For example, it tells you that you have to perform the backup, but it does not tell you, you know, how often you have to do it, which kind of technology you have to use, these kind of things. In this case, you actually have to perform the risk assessment and then conclude by yourself what is the best technology to perform the backup, and also what is the best frequency to perform this backup. So again, this is why this risk management is hugely important. It actually provides you with the insight on how to implement that particular control in the way that is the most appropriate for your company. Sven was asking, what is the best tactic to audit a company for readiness and ability to be compliant with the 27001? You basically have to go through each and every requirement of the standard, but more importantly, you actually have to, as an auditor, you have to go through each and every requirement of your policies and procedures. So for example, if you have the backup policy saying that you have to perform the backup every 3 hours, then you have to check as an auditor if the company performs the backup every 3 hours. And funnily enough, about 80%, so 80% of non-conformities are happening not because the companies are not compliant with the ISO 27001. No, 80% are actually non-conformities related to their own policies and procedures. Can you actually imagine this? You know, companies are writing their own rules and then they're not complying with their own rules, and this is the majority of problems that they see, right? So what is the point here? The point is, you know, do not write policies and procedures that do not make sense. Write only the ones that actually make sense for your company, and then it will be much easier for you to comply with them. Okay, Anil is asking, was asking, please provide how to address the challenges of a global enterprise spread across 8 to 10 countries and 15 different locations will face while accomplishing 27001 certification. First of all, I would advise for such a big company to actually go only for a smaller scope, so basically one location, one country, and then as it learns how to do it, then actually expand the scope to other countries. Much cheaper approach, much I would say less stressful approach. I think this is by far the most important when dealing with such a big company. Okay, I know that we are on top of the hour, but I still have something like 10, maybe 15 questions waiting. So I'll try to answer all of these questions in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So if you can stick around, you know, this would be great. Anyway, next question I received, Carl, how to incorporate the security classification into ISO 27001 implementation. First of all, you have to assess whether classification is needed for you, because this is one of the controls, and none of these controls are mandatory. You can actually choose which of these controls are mandatory. If you do have risks or some other requirements that would require you to do the classification, then you would actually do this classification. Typically, if we're speaking about classification according to confidentiality, then you would actually take a look at the impact that you have for all of these assets. And then you would say, okay, where the impact is high, then you would actually classify them as, let's say, more confidential. Where the impact is lower, then you would classify them as less confidential. So basically this, again, risk assessment, again, is your main criteria for, you know, assessing, sorry, not assessing, but defining the level of confidentiality in this case. Somnia is asking, for initial risk assessment, is it good to do an enterprise risk assessment or information security risk assessment? Well, ISO 27001 does not mention enterprise risk assessment. It only mentions information security risk assessment. So if you want to be compliant with ISO 27001, you must do information security risk assessment. If you want to simplify things, do only the risk assessment for information security. You do not have to do the enterprise risk assessment, because this could include all kinds of other risks, like you know, I don't know, financial risk, you know, market risk, all kinds of risks which are not related to information security. So it's always best to focus only on security things if you want to complete your project quickly. Bob was asking, what were the most common challenges encountered during buy-in with the management and other stakeholders when implementing the ISMS, and how to overcome them? Okay, I believe that I answered this question when I was speaking about how to present things to the senior management. Tom was asking, what is the best way to balance the need for detailed asset inventories with the cost of having to look at a huge number of separate assets? Okay, so I would say that if you are a smaller company, you don't have to create a separate asset inventory. You can actually use your list of assets that you used for risk assessment. So again, if you're a small company, if you use this asset-based approach for risk assessment, then you need to list all the assets, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do the risk assessment. So in this case, you simply use this existing list of assets in the risk register in your risk assessment as also basically a list of, inventory of your assets. If you are a mid-sized or larger company, then you would typically already have your asset inventory, because larger companies especially cannot really work and if they don't already have some kind of an asset inventory. So in this case, you already have this kind of a document, so no additional work there, I would say. Okay, let me go back to the questions I received during the webinar. Question from MoMA. What is the difference in NIS2 versus ISO 27001? If one implements 27001, is it good basis for NIS2? Well, NIS2 is a directive from European Union. It's mandatory for these 18 sectors, whereas 27001 is worldwide. It's not meant only for EU. And it can be applied to any kind of company. There is no, let's say, definition of which sectors does it apply to. So completely different, I would say, purposes. And yeah, 27001 is not as, I would say, detailed as these NIS2 laws and regulations. So again, as I mentioned, you can use 27001 as a basis for NIS2. Question from 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀𝗁. What do you think is the smallest size of a company for a successful 27001 implementation? Yeah, as I mentioned, so in our case, we had a client of 2 employees only. Okay, another question from 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀𝗁. What do you... Okay, I answered this one. Good. Let me see some other questions that came in. Okay, from 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀𝗁. Is it allowed that the DPO and the ISO is the same person? Yes, basically it's allowed. It's not, I would say, highly recommended, because there might be some conflicts of interest between a person in charge of privacy and security. So if you are a small company, then yes, you can't really afford to have actually 2 separate roles for this. But if you are a company of a couple of thousand employees, then you should try to separate these 2 roles. Lutz is asking, if you want to do implementation in-house with the occasional help of a consultant, what documents, risk analysis, etc. should you prepare before meeting the consultant for the first time? If you do have the consultant, then ask him or her what exactly would this consultant prefer. I would say each consultant has their own style of working, and you should basically, you're paying this person to actually guide you. So let him or her guide you on what you need to prepare. Okay, yeah, let me try to go through some other questions here. Jay is asking, can you please shed some light on how to properly set the scope properly with examples? Say how to set this for a specific policy versus department. I'm not sure if I understand the question, but basically the scope is defined in terms of processes and departments. So typically you would go with the one department if you're a larger company. If you're a smaller company below 50 employees, then you would typically include everything in the scope. And by the way, we shared already this link to this article around how to set the scope, so please take a look at this article. Rowan is asking, if non-conformities are found during the internal audit and the corrective action is going to take 6 months, can I still do the external audit for the certification before the corrective action is complete? I would say yes, but this is a risk, because if this non-conformity is something, I would say, crucial for the company, and it is related to very high risks, then there is a danger that actually a certification auditor says that he cannot allow this non-conformity to be resolved later on. So for some smaller, let's say, if this non-conformity is related to some smaller risks, then you can do it later on. But if this is really something very risky, I'm not sure if it is a good idea to go for a certification before resolving it. Jay is asking, currently Conformio does only 27001. Do you plan to include SOC 2 PCI NIST in the near future? In the future, yes, but probably not near future. So for example, we are working now on including ISO 42001, the AI standard, and 9001, the quality standard in Conformio. So this is going to be, I would say, in the near future. Natalia is asking, what types of controls are required to information security service providers compared to regular material suppliers. There is no fixed, list of controls for different types of companies. I mean, for example, both of these companies will have to apply backup, or both of these companies will have to control from the security point their suppliers, or both of these companies will have to control their laptops. Okay, so it's very hard to kind of differentiate the controls for different types of industries. 𝗥𝗲𝗴𝗶𝘀𝗁 asks, how many team members would in average be required to implement the project to obtain 27001 certification? Okay, typically you need to have a project manager. This is one person, a sponsor. This is someone from the senior management, and then you would normally include either all heads of the departments or only some of them. So let's say that you have, I don't know, 10 departments in your company. Out of these 10, you would typically include, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 heads of these departments to actually help you. And they will, help you with, either writing documents or reviewing these documents, or, I don't know, during the risk assessment, helping you with identifying the assets, these kind of things. So I would say that this, of course, depends also on the company size, but, this team size would range somewhere from, let's say, 2 or 3 employees for smaller companies, all the way to maybe, I don't know, 10 employees for mid-size or larger companies. By the way, in this, we shared the link to this implementation guide, and there you actually have a breakdown of, let's say, which people need to participate in the project, also with the amount of time that they should be investing in. So take a look at this article and see what is suggested there. Dua is asking, when engaging external consultants, how can we measure the performance and value delivered by consultants? You actually have to define clear terms with them. So basically, what kind of documentation they have to deliver, what kind of analysis they have to deliver, what is the timeline when all the activities need to be completed. So all of these things are something that you actually have to define before you actually start, define in the contract, so that you have something exactly against that, basically something that you can actually measure the effectiveness of this consultant. Maybe a consultant can guarantee you that you will get certified. I'm not sure if I don't know many consultants that do this, but maybe there are some consultants that could guarantee you that you will succeed at the certification. Okay, final question for today, Jay. We don't know in the beginning what technology we may need until we do some planning and risk assessment. So coming up with the fund requirements in the beginning won't make much sense without knowing what we may need. This is actually a very good point. And if you remember in these steps that I was showing you in the first part of the presentation, one step was definition of this risk treatment plan. And as part of this risk treatment plan, then you actually define in detail what kind of technologies you will need, what kind of resources, the budget for these things, and so on. So you're right. You actually you'll be able to kind of pinpoint the details of your budget once you actually complete the risk treatment plan. And this was step something like 8 or 9 in the implementation. Okay, very well. I think these are all the questions for today. So let me wrap up the webinar. So as I mentioned, this 1-hour webinar was too short for to go into details like risk management and these kind of things. And for that purpose, please do take a look at my other webinars and also videos on YouTube, and of course test also out how Conformia and Company Training Academy can help you. And yeah, regarding the presentation deck, if you join the webinar through Zoom, then we will send you the link to the presentation deck through email, and you will receive it by tomorrow morning. And if you joined through LinkedIn or YouTube, then please wait, actually we will display the link for downloading this presentation deck in the comment section. So if you can just keep this page open for maybe 10 more minutes, you will see it in the comment section. Just in about 10 minutes, go to this comment section. You will see a link for downloading the presentation deck, and you will also see all the links that we shared today in the webinar. So you can actually see them again there. And you will also see a link for a short survey. So I would really appreciate if you could answer this survey, and there are only 3 questions, so it's very quick, because this survey will give me feedback on how I was doing in this webinar today. This would be all. Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope you have enjoyed this webinar. Have a nice day.